Chairman Collins and my colleagues, first of all, let me do a couple of things that I was unable to do in the past conversation. First of all, by recognizing the contribution that Senator Merkley is intending and attempting to make. And I am one who would be interested in trying to figure out ways, maybe that's I worry about putting us all in the old Senate chamber and having a conversation, because then once again we are separating the appropriators from the Senate, our colleagues, not always to our advantage, but I'm willing to participate in a conversation about how we retain our constitutional and fulfill our constitutional responsibilities and fulfill our obligations, and to find ways that we can continue to be colleagues that find solutions to problems despite our differences. And secondly, I want to indicate that in the manager's package of the Milcon VA bill, we were successful in adding an amendment, and I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for doing so. This is COFA and our ability to continue to have solid relationships with those who served in our military and the countries in which they come from and live in. And it's an important issue, really should be to all of us, but particularly to our colleagues from Hawaii and elsewhere. And Senator Boozman and Senator Ossoff allowed us to, and by us, I mean Senator Schatz and I, to add an amendment. It follows a meeting that we had, we being Senator Risch, Senator Boozman, and myself, the other word is me, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, the chairman of Milcon VA, and the chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, because we're concerned that the Department of Veterans Affairs is not following the mandate that we have required them to follow in providing medical care and benefits to those who live in the South Pacific that served in our military. And so I want to highlight that language that is important to Senator Schatz has been included, and I will continue to work as chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, and Senator Boozman as chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee with jurisdiction. And I would tell you that Senator Risch is fully engaged in trying to make certain that the Department of Veterans Affairs takes a different tact and a different approach to this issue in following congressional mandate. When I complimented or indicated my interest in finding a way forward, I also would add one more thing. This committee and our subcommittees need to, I don't know whether it's returned, because it hasn't been that prevalent in the time I've been a member of the Appropriations Committee, which is my entire time in the Senate, but oversight. When we find things that we don't like in the bill, it embarrasses me that I don't know that. But with our schedules and just the press of business, our ability to do oversight is woefully lacking. And we ought to figure out, as committee chairman and vice chairman of our subcommittees, how our subcommittees not only appropriate, but then make sure that the money that we appropriated is rightfully used according to the law. To turn to the bill at hand, it has been described to all of you last Thursday, a week ago today, and I thank I thank the chairwoman and the ranking member for allowing this bill to be considered, further considered today. At the beginning of the markup of Commerce, Justice, Science last week, the committee voted to report this bill on a strong bipartisan vote of 21-6. I would highlight and repeat what I said last week. This is a bill that, in the absence of Senator Van Hollen's amendment, I would have expected to pass unanimously. And by saying that, I cast no criticism of Senator Van Hollen. I had the pleasure of chairing and being the ranking member, the vice chairman of this subcommittee with Senator Shaheen, and I can tell, and I told Senator Van Hollen, I hated the fact that Senator Shaheen was going someplace else. But I can tell you that, in my view, Senator Van Hollen and I have worked well together, and this bill reflects the priorities that he fought for his constituency, and for the constituency of all of us in this room, and for the benefit of the Senate and the country. And I have no objection to Senator Van Hollen's efforts and attempts to make certain that his position and reflecting the desire of his state is heard and considered. There's a challenge that comes with that, because my overriding effort has been to find a path forward, which is why we drafted the bill that we drafted. And I suppose there's a way that we could draft a bill with only Republican support in this committee. But my goal is not to make a statement. My goal is to make legislation. And I want to see us report a bill to the committee that you all can be supportive of, and that amendment makes it impossible to do. This legislation supports, under the allocation that we've been given, and I thank the chairman and the ranking member for the allocation, but under the allocation we've been given, we have made every effort to adequately support things that are really important to the country. This bill, Commerce, Justice, Science, does lots of things, and it's involved in lots of things that really matter. And it's about the Department of Commerce and the growth. It's about science and NASA and NSF. And we've made the attempt to find the highest number of resources with the most responsibility for how they're spent that we can do with the dollars that we have to spend. In addition to that, things that stood out to us: law enforcement, the Department of Justice and its grant programs to our local law enforcement, sheriffs and police chiefs and their departments, in regard to NOAA and weather forecasting, and in regard to NSF and the future of our scientific capabilities that benefit our economy and our national security. After that vote that we took last week, the initial bipartisan vote, the committee adopted 3 amendments. The manager's package, an amendment by the ranking member that was adopted on a voice vote, and then an amendment from Senator Van Hollen on the funding for the FBI headquarters building. As we talked last week, there is money that was placed in this bill a decade ago for purposes of an FBI headquarters. We have not appropriated that money, and it has sat in our account for a long time. This committee really has little jurisdiction, I should say no jurisdiction, over the GSA in determining the site for which this FBI headquarters should rest. The amendment that Senator Van Hollen, in his effort to deal with this issue of the FBI headquarters, the adoption of that amendment caused then a significant shift in the votes in this committee. I've never seen what we did last week, but we did something new and different. And unfortunately, the result of that was this bill is currently failing on a vote of 13 ayes and 14 nays. I opposed that amendment. I believe it was prescriptive and it interjects this committee into site selection process. And if we have a role, if it's in the Appropriations Committee, it better rests with FSGG and the GSA. In my view, I listened to the concerns that we all had, and there was a theme. There was more than one theme in the conversation, but one of the themes was, could we get to the point in which we actually appropriate and put bills on the Senate floor? I was telling one of our colleagues today that, with a smile, because it's not true, in Kansas, you can only lie if you admit you're lying. I said, when I was a little boy in western Kansas and sat on my front porch of my parents' house and dreamed about being a United States Senator, it was not a dream. I'll say it this way. I dreamed about spending every day doing nominations and confirmations. I want something different here. I want to see us have a role to play, and a significant role to play. And as we talked earlier, one of the things that's important in getting us to that position is that bills are considered by subcommittees, considered by this committee, and reported, and then we go to battle to educate and can get the confirmation from our colleagues that we're doing something right. There is, I mentioned this in earlier remarks, there's a sense about this committee of being separate from the rest of our colleagues. And the floor action is where everybody should get a chance, and we've been denied that either by the bills not coming to the floor, or even if they do, they come in packages of such magnitude that there's no time for amendments. We limit the scope. And so we have a lot of work to do to revive the value and importance of what we do here with our colleagues and with our process. So it brings me back to this bill. I'm back on the mission that I told you that I was on last week when we considered this legislation. It is essential for us to enact the CJS bill this year, but let's do it in a way that gets 60 votes on the Senate floor or more. Absent the amendment that Senator Van Hollen offered, this is a strong bipartisan bill that supports things that every member of this committee brought to our attention. And if we're going to get this bipartisan bill out of the committee, we need to address the amendment that cost us the number of votes to do so. It cost us the bipartisan support that we had when we started last Thursday's markup. Therefore, I'm going to offer an amendment that strikes the amendment from Senator Van Hollen that was adopted on a recorded vote. This amendment has, again, I take things personally too, and my intention is to continue to be an ally and friend of the vice chairman of this subcommittee and to find ways in which we can continue to cooperate to provide all of you the opportunity to vote on a bill this year and into the future that has value to the country. So this is the next step, in my view, is to return this bill to the bipartisan situation it was in before the adoption of that amendment. So I respectfully offer the following amendment to strike Senator Van Hollen's amendment. And that would require me to have the language that says that. On page 86, I offer the following amendment. On page 86, line 5 of the bill, strike the new section adopted through the amendment entitled Van Hollen, Ray, FBI Headquarters.